Welcome back to the deep dive, and a really, really special welcome to everyone joining us today from the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
Yes, welcome.
We are so glad you're here with us because we have a topic on the table today that is, well, it's about as universal as it gets.
It's one of those things that touches everyone sooner or later.
It really is. I mean, every single person listening, and I really do mean everyone, has either already been through this, is maybe going through it right now, or, let's be honest, will absolutely have to face it at some point.
It's an inevitability of the human experience.
Yeah.
No way around it.
Exactly. And yet, for something so universal, it's like this giant thing that nobody wants to talk about. It's this huge secret we all keep until, bam, you're thrown right into the deep end without a life vest. We are talking about the absolute pressure cooker of navigating family conflict during funeral planning.
And pressure cooker is, I think, the most accurate term you could possibly use. It's the elephant in the room that, more often than not, ends up breaking all the furniture before anyone even admits it's there.
Right. It just stomps all over everything. So today we are diving into a really comprehensive set of source materials, the main one being a guide called Harmony in Grief. And our mission here is pretty clear.
Yeah.
We want to challenge that image we all have in our heads about funerals. You know the one I mean, right? The one from the movie.
Oh, totally. Everyone's in perfectly tailored black coats.
Yes. And they're all standing around a gravesite, just, quietly weeping into these pristine handkerchiefs, and they're hugging, and everyone is on their absolute best behavior. It looks so peaceful.
It looks serene. But the reality of planning that serene event, the 72 hours leading up to that moment,
Not so serene.
it is almost never peaceful. In fact, the source material makes this really compelling point right at the start. It describes the whole situation as a paradox.
Okay, let's unpack that. A paradox. Because on the surface, it really just seems like logistics, right?
Yeah.
You pick a casket, you pick some flowers, you call the church. Where's the paradox in that?
The paradox is in the clash between capacity and demand. Think about it. You are asking a group of people, a family, to make dozens of decisions.
Dozens.
And these aren't small decisions. They're high stakes, they're deeply symbolic, and frankly, they can be very, very expensive. And you're asking them to do all of this instantly.
Right, the clock starts ticking the second it happens.
The clock is ticking. But here's the kicker. You are asking them to perform all this highly complex cognitive work at the precise moment when they have the absolute least amount of emotional bandwidth to handle it.
Okay.
Their brains are just flooded with grief, with shock, with pure exhaustion.
So it's basically the worst possible time to have to become a project manager.
Precisely. It's the absolute worst time. The cognitive load is immense, and the emotional reserves are. They're just empty. You're being asked to run a marathon on an empty stomach after you've been awake for 2 days straight.
Wow.
It's a recipe for an explosion.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to see if we can, maybe diffuse that bomb a little bit. We want to use harmony in grief to lay out a practical roadmap. Is it even possible to get through this process without tearing a family completely apart?
A very important question.
And I think this is so valuable for you, the learner, listening in, whether you're in the thick of it right now, or maybe you're worried about the future, or even if you're just fascinated by human psychology under extreme pressure.
And it is extreme pressure.
Because that's really what this is, isn't it? It's a case study of human beings at their absolute limit.
It absolutely is. And to really understand that pressure, we have to look at the environment it happens in. The source material brings up this idea of the vacuum, or more accurately, the lack of one. It says, and I'm paraphrasing, funeral planning rarely happens in a vacuum.
That's an interesting phrase. What does that actually mean in practice? Because I think for a lot of people, when someone dies, it feels like the whole world stops. It feels very much like a vacuum.
It feels like the world stops for you. Individually, yes. But the family history, that doesn't stop. In fact, the death acts as an amplifier.
An amplifier.
It takes everything that was already there in the family dynamic.
Yeah.
All the old tensions, the personality clashes, the different belief systems, the rivalries from childhood, and it just cranks the volume up to 11.
So if I was, a little annoyed by the way my brother chewed his food at Thanksgiving dinner,
Yeah.
suddenly when we're sitting in the funeral home, that tiny annoyance becomes this murderous rage.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
That is a perfect way to put it. If there was a tiny crack in the foundation of that relationship, the earthquake of grief is going to split it wide open.
Wow.
If you felt your sister was a bit bossy when you were 12, you're going to hear her suggestions about the catering not as help, but as a direct attack on your autonomy.
You're not just reacting to the moment.
No, you're reacting to 30 years of history that just came rushing back.
And this leads to something in the reading that gave me a huge aha moment. The source suggests that most of the fights that families have during this week, they aren't actually about the funeral at all.
This is maybe the most crucial point. They're almost never about the funeral.
Wait, really? Because I have a friend who told me his family didn't speak for a whole year because of a fight over flower arrangements. You're saying that wasn't about the flowers?
I am. I'm sure they were screaming about the flowers, yes. The flowers were the object of the sentence.
The battlefield.
The battlefield, exactly.
Yeah.
But the war wasn't about the flowers. The flowers are just the proxy. They were fighting about something so much deeper: control, validation, their shared history, guilt. The logistical details just happen to be where these deeper wars are fought.
I really want to dig into that. But first, let's look at what the source calls the anatomy of conflict. Why does it explode specifically during the funeral planning? Why not at the hospital? Or 6 months later at the reading of the will?
Right, it's a specific window. Well, looking at section 1 of our outline, we have what we can call the perfect storm. You've got two main factors colliding here: the catalyst and the constraints.
Okay, break those down for us. The catalyst seems pretty obvious. It's the death.
It is the death, yes, but more specifically, it's what the death does to the family's structure. It resurrects all this unresolved history.
Huh.
The source notes that the death of a parent, for example, forces siblings to suddenly confront their roles in the family in a way they never had to before. The buffer, the parent, is gone.
So now they have to deal with each other directly.
Directly. It's like the lid has been taken off the jar, and everything that was packed down inside is now free to come out.
And what about the constraints?
That's the time factor. It's the brutal collision of incredibly high emotional stakes with ridiculously tight deadlines. Let me put it this way. If you were planning a wedding, how long would you take?
Oh, a year.
Yeah.
Minimum. You'd taste test the cake, you'd visit 5 different venues, you'd debate the playlist for months on end.
Exactly. You have the luxury of time to process your decisions, to change your mind. In a funeral, you have to decide on the casket, the service order, the music, the burial plot, and the reception menu.
All in one afternoon.
Often in a single afternoon, yes. Decisions that should take weeks have to be made in a matter of hours. That kind of urgency, it creates panic.
And panic removes our filter.
It absolutely does. It forces us back into our most primal, instinctive coping mechanisms. We stop thinking logically, and we start reacting emotionally. And this brings us right back to those proxy wars we touched on.
Yes, let's go back to that, because I really want to understand how a flower arrangement can literally destroy a family.
Okay, let's use a specific example.
Yeah.
Let's say you have two siblings. We'll call them Sarah and Dave. Their mother has just passed away. They're at the florist.
Okay.
Sarah wants lilies.
Yeah.
Dave insists on roses.
Mm.
Suddenly, they're shouting at each other in the middle of the shop.
All right, so on the surface, it's just a preference dispute. I like lilies, you like roses.
Yeah.
Simple.
Right? That's the surface level.
Right.
But let's peel back the layers. Why is Sarah fighting so hard for lilies?
Okay.
Well, maybe Mom loved lilies. Maybe Sarah spent the last 5 years as her primary caregiver. She was the one driving her to appointments, sitting with her during chemo, holding her hand. She knows Mom loves lilies. So to Sarah, the lilies represent her stewardship, her sacrifice, her intimate knowledge of her mother. They validate her role.
Okay, that makes total sense. She's honoring her mom in a way only she feels she can. So why is Dave fighting for roses? Is it just to be difficult?
Rarely.
Yeah.
Maybe Dave has been living across the country for the last 5 years. He hasn't been there.
Yeah.
And he is carrying an immense, crushing amount of guilt about that.
Oof. Okay.
He wants roses because they're expensive, they're classic, they are seen as the best. In his mind, he's trying to buy his way out of his guilt. He's trying to show, see, I love her too. I'll spend the most. So when Dave says, no, we have to get the roses, Sarah doesn't hear, I prefer red flowers. She hears, I am completely disregarding your years of sacrifice. I'm stepping in now to take control, even though I wasn't here when it really mattered.
And Dave, he doesn't hear Mom liked lilies. He hears, you don't get a vote because you were a bad son. You weren't here.
Exactly. That is the proxy war. The lilies and roses are just the ammunition. The real war is about guilt and validation, and who has the right to grieve the most.
That's actually terrifying. Because it means that every tiny decision, the font on the program, the color of the tie for the viewing, is a potential landmine.
It is, every single one.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding that, recognizing that is the very first step to diffusing it. If you could realize, wait a minute, Dave isn't trying to ruin the funeral, he's just trying to manage his own pain, you might respond differently.
Right.
The source has this great line. It says, these disputes are attempts to manage internal pain through external logistics.
That really changes how you see a difficult family member, doesn't it? Instead of thinking, why are they being so stubborn and irrational, you have to start asking, what is that specific choice doing for them emotionally?
That is the critical shift in perspective.
Yeah.
But even with that shift, you still have to deal with the raw fact that people just grieve differently. And that brings us to the next big section in the source material, the spectrum of grief responses.
This part of the reading was absolutely fascinating to me because I think we have a very stereotypical view of grief, crying, sadness, maybe a bit of anger. But the guide points out that our brains are fundamentally wired differently, and that wiring dictates how we act in a crisis.
And the friction, the conflict, it often comes not from the grief itself, but from the mismatch in how different people in the family grieve.
The clash of styles.
Exactly. The guide identifies a few archetypes. Let's start with one it calls the doer.
Okay, I'm just going to out myself right here. I am 100% the doer. If there's a crisis, I have a spreadsheet open within 5 minutes.
I can see that.
I'm making lists, I'm calling vendors, I'm delegating tasks. And I always thought that was the right way to handle things. You're being useful.
And for you, it's a coping mechanism. It's a very effective one. For the doer, action is the antidote to the pain of helplessness. You feel out of control because of the death. So you try to regain control by organizing the external environment. You're running on adrenaline and efficiency.
Which sounds helpful. I mean, who doesn't want someone organizing the catering when you can barely think straight?
Logistically, it is incredibly helpful. But emotionally, it can be an absolute disaster if you aren't careful. Because imagine you, the doer, are in the room with your sibling, who is the withdrawer.
Okay, the person who just shuts down.
Right. The withdrawer is completely overwhelmed by the sensory input and the sheer force of the emotion. Their system floods, and they shut down as a protective measure. They might go silent, or stay in bed, or just stare at the wall for hours.
Okay, so paint the picture.
You, the doer, are running around with your clipboard and your spreadsheet, asking about appetizer choices for the reception. The withdrawer is just sitting on a couch, staring into space, doing nothing. What do you think about them in that moment?
Honestly, I look at them and I think, why aren't you helping? Do you even care that this has to get done? I'm doing everything here by myself.
Exactly. You judge their inaction as laziness or, even worse, indifference. But let's flip it. What is the withdrawer thinking when they look at you?
They're probably thinking, how can you be worrying about shrimp puffs right now? Dad just died. You're acting like a robot. You have no feelings.
Yes. They see your efficiency as coldness. They think you're avoiding the feelings by staying busy. So now you have two people who both love the deceased immensely, but they're judging each other's grief as fundamentally wrong.
That is a massive source of conflict right there. You're cold versus you're useless, when in reality, you're both just trying to survive the week.
Correct. And then you have another common clash, the source mentions, the traditionalist versus the personalizer.
I've seen this one play out.
It's often a generational split, but not always. The traditionalist seeks safety and comfort in ritual. They want the standard liturgy, the familiar hymns, the dark suits. That structure holds them together when their entire world is falling apart.
They need the rules because the rules feel safe and predictable.
Precisely. This is how we've always done things. It provides a container for the grief. But then you have the personalizer. They feel that the standard ritual is cold, impersonal, and sort of cookie cutter.
Right.
They want to change things up to reflect the unique personality of the person who died. They might want to play a Led Zeppelin song instead of a hymn, or ask everyone to wear bright colors because, Dad hated black.
And to the traditionalist, that feels disrespectful, sacrilegious.
It feels chaotic. It feels like you aren't taking the gravity of the situation seriously. And to the personalizer, the traditionalist seems stiff, inauthentic, and fake. It's a fundamental clash of values. One values propriety and history, while the other values authenticity and expression.
So you have these personality clashes, and then layered on top of that, you have the actual structural changes happening in the family itself. The source calls this shifting family roles.
This is huge. And we often don't even realize how hierarchical our families are until the person at the top of that hierarchy is gone. We call this the power vacuum.
Right. If mom was the one who made all the decisions for 40 years, and then mom dies, who sits at the head of the table now?
It's a deeply unsettling question, and often there's a scramble for that seat, or sometimes everyone just looks around paralyzed, waiting for someone else to step up. But the source highlights a very specific phenomenon here called sudden assertiveness.
What's that?
It's when a sibling who has historically been very passive, maybe they're the baby of the family or just a quiet one, suddenly steps up and tries to take charge. They decide, you know what? I am going to handle this.
And that would shock the rest of the family, right?
It completely disrupts the established dynamic. The older siblings might feel threatened or resentful. Wait a minute, I'm the oldest. I'm supposed to make the calls. It challenges the pecking order at the exact time when everyone is feeling their most insecure.
And speaking of challenging the dynamic, we have to talk about the return of the estranged. This feels like a movie trope, but the source material says it's very, very real.
It is a classic source of high drama. You have a sibling or another relative who has been absent for years. Maybe they lived far away. Maybe they were emotionally distant.
They weren't part of the day-to-day.
Exactly. They haven't been part of the caregiving. They weren't at the Sunday dinners. But they fly in for the funeral. And often they arrive with the strongest, loudest opinions in the entire room.
Why is that? You would think they'd take a back seat since they weren't around. You'd think they would be a little more humble.
It's almost always the opposite. It's overcompensation. It's that guilt again. They are trying to make up for 5 years of absence in 1 week of intense planning. They want the best casket, the most flowers, the longest eulogy. They are performing their love for everyone to see.
But to the siblings who were there, changing the adult diapers and driving to the doctor's appointments, that must be absolutely infuriating.
It feels like a slap in the face. It
Yeah.
feels like them saying, your work didn't matter, I'm in charge now. The resentment is toxic and it just bubbles up instantly. Where were you? You don't get to swoop in now and play the hero.
Okay, so we have painted a pretty bleak picture here. We've got the pressure cooker, the proxy wars, the clashing grief styles, the power vacuums. It honestly sounds hopeless.
Can feel that way.
But the guide, Harmony in Grief, it actually claims there is a way through all of this. It talks about the art of reframing.
This is the pivot point. This is the key. If listeners take only one thing away from this entire deep dive, this should probably be it. The source suggests you have to move from me to them.
Okay, explain the me versus them pivot. Because right now, me is hurting, so me really wants to be heard.
And that's natural.
Yeah.
But the central cause, almost every conflict, is usually some version of the question, what do I want? Or what would make me feel better right now?
Right.
And that question inevitably leads to a battle of wills, because what you want and what your sister wants are likely different, because your emotional needs are different.
So what's the right question to ask?
The right question is, what best represents them? You have to reframe the entire planning process as a shared act of remembrance, not a competition of personal preferences.
Can you give us an example of how that sounds in a real conversation? Let's go back to the music choice fight.
Sure. So you have 2 siblings arguing. One wants to play Amazing Grace, the other wants My Way by Frank Sinatra. If they argue based on their own preference, I hate Sinatra, well, I think hymns are boring and outdated, they will never agree. It just becomes a power struggle.
Okay, so how do you use the pivot?
You stop, you take a breath, and you ask the question, if Dad were sitting in this chair right now and he could pick the song, which one would he actually play?
And that creates a neutral anchor. It's not about me or you anymore.
It does. It takes the ego completely out of it. If everyone in the room knows Dad couldn't stand Frank Sinatra, then My Way is out, even if his son loves the song. If Dad went to church every single Sunday of his life, Amazing Grace wins. Not because the daughter won the argument, but because Dad won.
That is such a simple but powerful tool. It creates a third party in the room, the deceased, who actually gets to cast the deciding vote.
Exactly. It shifts the goal from winning the argument to honoring the person. And alongside that, the source emphasizes the power of shared memory as a de-escalation tool.
How does that work in practice?
When tensions get really high, when you can feel people starting to snap at each other about logistics, one of the best things you can do is stop the planning entirely, just for a few minutes, and reminisce.
Just tell stories.
Yes. Share a story about the deceased's quirks. Talk about their famously bad cooking or their terrible dad jokes or that one time they got hopelessly lost on a family vacation. What this does is it humanizes the room again. It reminds everyone, hey, I know we are fighting about the catering right now, but we are only in this room because we both love this person.
It reconnects the circuit of empathy that got shorted out by the stress.
It does. It is very hard to scream at your brother when you're both laughing about how Dad used to burn the Thanksgiving turkey to a crisp every single year. It literally lowers the cortisol in the room.
Speaking of cortisol, I want to move to section 4, strategic communication tools. Because remembering Dad's bad jokes is great, but sometimes you need, like, tactical advice on how to actually talk to someone who is making you crazy in that moment.
You do. You need a game plan. And the first tactical piece of advice from the source is scheduling.
Scheduling the arguments, is that what you mean?
In a way, yes. The advice is never, ever have the big talk spontaneously.
Yeah.
And never, ever have them late at night when you're exhausted.
Oh, I have made that mistake. Trying to decide on the details of the burial plot at 11 p.m. after a glass of wine when everyone is just emotionally drained.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. Your defenses are down, your emotions are raw, you have no filter. The guy suggests you actually schedule the planning sessions. Say, okay, tomorrow at 10 a.m. after we've all had coffee and some breakfast, we're going to sit down for 1 hour and just discuss the service order.
I like that. It creates a container for the stress. It contains the conflict. So you aren't just fighting all day long in little bursts.
Exactly. You know there is a designated time for it, so you don't have to let it bleed into every single interaction you have.
And once you're in that meeting, are there rules?
Yes. The source talks about establishing ground rules.
Like what?
Really simple things. No interrupting. Or, my personal favorite, everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice.
Ooh, I love that one. Everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice.
That immediately stops the loud doers like me from steamrolling the entire room. It creates equity. It forces the room to pause and actually listen to the withdrawer or the quieter sibling who might have a great idea but is hesitant to speak up. And when you are listening, the source suggests using what it calls the validation technique.
Okay.
This is so crucial because, as we said before, people fight much, much harder when they feel like they're not being heard.
So what's the magic phrase here?
I understand why that matters to you.
That sounds simple, but I feel like there's a trap there. It sounds a lot like agreement, like you're giving in.
And that's the trick. It isn't agreement. It is acknowledgement. Let's say your sister wants an open casket, and you absolutely hate the idea. You find it morbid.
Right.
Don't just say, no, that's a terrible idea. Say, I understand that seeing him one last time is really important to you for your sense of closure.
And that just diffuses the defensiveness. You're not saying, yes, let's do it. You're just saying, I hear you. Your feelings are valid.
Completely. Once someone feels understood, they stop fighting to be heard, and they can actually start collaborating on a potential solution. But sometimes, even with validation, things just get too hot.
When the yelling starts.
That's when you have to hit the pause button. And I want to get a little nerdy and biological here for a second, because this isn't just polite advice. This is a biological necessity.
Let's get nerdy. What is actually happening in our brains during one of these funeral fights?
Okay, so when you are in that heated argument, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You're in full fight or flight mode. Biologically, your body thinks you're being chased by a bear.
Even though the bear is just my brother who wants different flowers.
Your ancient lizard brain doesn't know the difference. And when that happens, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic, empathy, complex decision-making, and impulse control, it literally goes offline. It shuts down to conserve energy for the fight.
So you literally become dumber when you're angry.
Functionally, yes. You lose the capacity for nuance. You cannot empathize. You can't see their point of view. So when the source says, hit the pause button, it means you need to stop talking immediately. Stop the conversation.
And for how long?
You need about 20 to 30 minutes for that cortisol to flush out of your system so your prefrontal cortex can reboot and come back online.
So trying to push through the argument is actually biologically impossible at that moment.
It's like trying to drive a car with no wheels. You are not going anywhere, and you're just going to do more damage to the engine. Take a walk. Go to separate rooms. Drink some water. A decision that seems absolutely impossible at 2 p.m. might be surprisingly easy at 4 p.m. once everyone's brain is back online.
That completely changes the way I see those arguments. It's not just stubbornness, it's a biological lockout.
Exactly.
Now, I want to move on to section 5, because this is where the rubber meets the road, or I guess, where the ink meets the paper. We need to talk about specific friction points, especially the funeral program and other written legacies.
Ah, yes. The permanence of print. This is a known minefield.
The source material, and it mentions insights from places like the funeral program site. It highlights that this is a massive conflict zone. Why do people get so incredibly worked up over a piece of paper? I mean, it's just a program that people might throw away later.
Is it, though?
Yeah.
Or is it history? See, a service is spoken, the words go into the air, and then they're gone. But a program, an obituary, that's printed, it gets archived online. It feels like history is being written in stone.
So if there's a mistake or an omission, it feels permanent.
It's not just about typos, it's about erasure. If a name is left out of the survived by list, or if the order of the siblings is wrong, or if a stepchild is listed differently than a biological child, it feels like a deliberate public insult. It feels like you were being written out of the family history.
It's an existential threat. It's like, if I'm not in the obituary, did I even matter to him?
Precisely. And we see this conflict explode in complex, blended families, stepfamilies, ex-spouses. The questions are agonizing. Do we list the ex-wife he was married to for 30 years? Do we acknowledge the estranged son? Families often try to use the obituary to correct the official record. They want to settle old scores.
Like writing, he was the devoted father of, and they only list the kids who visited him in the nursing home, but they leave out the one who didn't.
Exactly. It's weaponized writing. And the source references these program sites to make a really good point. These materials should be viewed as a tribute to a life lived, not a place to resolve family history.
Unpack that distinction for me.
It means the obituary should be seen as a highlight reel, not a deposition. It is not a legal document that is intended to capture every single nuance of a messy divorce or a decades-long family feud. It's meant to represent the best of the person.
So the advice is to err on the side of grace.
Always, every time. Err on the side of inclusion. It costs you absolutely nothing to add a name, but it can cost the family its peace for a decade if you choose to leave one out. Nobody reads an obituary and says, hey, wait a minute, I don't think that son visited enough to be on this list. But the son will read it, and he will feel hated and erased forever.
A highlight reel, not a deposition. I'm going to remember that phrase. So how do you resolve the smaller fights over the details? The font, the photos, the choice of poem?
The best strategy is prioritization, or as we more commonly say, picking your battles. The guide encourages listeners to sit down and identify the one thing that truly matters to them.
Just one thing.
Ideally, yes, because you cannot control everything without becoming a dictator and alienating everyone. So you say, you know what, I really, truly only care about doing the scripture reading and the service. That is my non-negotiable.
And if that's your one thing,
then you need to be willing to trade off on everything else. Let your sister pick the font. Let your brother pick the cover photo for the program. Who cares?
it's like an economy of control. You only spend your emotional capital on the one thing that's most important to you.
Right. If you try to control every single detail, the font, the photo, the poem, the paper stock, you will burn yourself out, and you will burn every bridge in your family. You have to give to get.
Moving on to Section 6. We have to talk about the two things that ruin friendships and families alike: money and authority.
The authority trap is a big one. The source makes a really vital distinction between legal authority and emotional authority.
What's the difference between the two?
Legal authority is simply who signs the papers. Maybe it's the executor of the estate or the designated next of kin. They have the final say in the eyes of the law regarding the body and the estate. But emotional authority belongs to everyone who loved the deceased.
Yeah.
They all feel invested. They all feel they have a right to have a say in the decisions.
So just because you're the one holding the pen doesn't mean you should act like a dictator.
Please don't. The inclusion strategy is key here. Even if you legally have the final say, you absolutely must involve others in the discussion. If you make unilateral decisions just because you can, well, I'm the executor, so we're doing cremation and that's final, you are breeding resentment that will last for decades.
People can accept a decision they don't necessarily like if they feel like they were at least heard and considered in the process.
Yes, 1,000 times, yes. We heard your request for burial. We discussed it as a family. But looking at the finances, we have to go with cremation. That is a world away from, I decided, now deal with it.
And speaking of finances, money just triggers so much shame and stress.
It triggers shame, stress, and deep-seated insecurity. The source advises total financial transparency from the very beginning.
Before any of the big decisions are made?
Yes. You have to have the budget talk first. Because imagine this scenario. One sibling assumes there's a huge life insurance policy and is picking out a top-of-the-line mahogany casket. Meanwhile, another sibling knows the estate is completely broke, and they might have to chip in from their own savings.
That's a massive collision waiting to happen.
You have to prevent the accusations of you're being cheap or you're being extravagant. You put the numbers on the table. This is what we have. This is what things cost. What can we realistically do with this? It turns it from a love problem into a math problem.
And sometimes, even with transparency and good intentions, the family just can't agree. They get stuck. That's when you need help.
The neutral third party. This is where funeral directors, clergy members, or grief counselors really earn their keep.
I feel like people are afraid to bring in a professional because it feels like admitting defeat. Like, we're so messed up as a family, we need to hire a referee.
But it's not defeat, it's strategy. A funeral director can say things a sibling simply cannot. If a brother says, that idea is crazy, we can't do that, it starts a fight. If a funeral director says, in my professional experience, that logistical choice might be difficult because of traffic patterns on a Saturday, the family listens.
It takes the personal emotion out of it. It becomes expert advice, not a personal attack from your sibling.
Exactly. Their role isn't to take sides, it is to facilitate.
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes just having a stranger in the room changes the behavior of the family. People tend to behave a little better when they have company over.
That is very true. We all put on our company manners.
Yeah.
Okay, Section 7 leads us to a concept that I really love, and I think it's something we all desperately need to hear. The good enough goodbye.
This is all about managing expectations. We have this Hollywood-fueled idea of the perfect send-off. Everything goes smoothly, the sun comes out at just the right moment, the eulogy is flawless and makes everyone cry and laugh.
Right.
But the source reminds us that collaborative decision-making does not mean unanimous agreement.
You don't have to get 100% of the vote to move forward.
You never will. The goal is a service where everyone feels respected, not necessarily a service where everyone gets their own way.
Yeah.
You're aiming for consensus, not unanimity.
And this often comes up with the generation gap, doesn't it? That clash of styles we talked about.
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
You have the older generation who often views the funeral as a formal religious obligation. Tradition, formality, black suits. Then you might have the younger generation who views it as a celebration of life. They want bright colors, personal stories, maybe a playlist of rock music, maybe a toast with whiskey at the cemetery.
So how do you bridge that gap? Those feel like complete opposites.
You blend the elements, the fixes in the mix. You can have the mullet strategy.
Mullet strategy. You mean business in the front, party in the back?
Laughs.
Laughs,
Yeah.
exactly. You have a traditional church service in the morning for grandma to satisfy the traditionalists, but then you follow it with a casual storytelling reception at a favorite restaurant for the grandkids. You can have a traditional hymn and then play a Beatles song on the way out of the chapel. It does not have to be all or nothing.
It's about compromise.
Yeah.
And frankly, just giving each other a break. The source talks about something called grief distortion. This is a really important psychological phenomenon. It's where words spoken under intense stress feel much, much harsher than they were ever intended. We all have thin skin during grief.
Yeah.
If your sister snaps at you, just move the chair, in a normal week, you probably ignore it. During funeral week, you hear, I hate you, and you're useless, and you never do anything right.
We project all of our own insecurity and pain onto their words.
We do. So the necessity here is temporary forgiveness. You almost have to make a pact to suspend judgment for the week of the funeral. You have to say to yourself, she didn't mean that. She's grieving. I'm letting it go.
Just for this 1 week, we can circle back to it and have a fight next month if we really have to.
Exactly. Just survive the week. Don't blow up a 30-year relationship over a snide comment that was made on 3 hours of sleep.
This brings us to our final stretch, Section 8, the long-term view. Because the funeral does end. The flowers wilt, the casseroles get eaten, but the family remains.
And the way the funeral was handled becomes a memory in and of itself. That's what the source calls the legacy of conflict. Years later, people might not remember the exact flowers or the specific words of the eulogy, but they will remember how they felt.
They will remember if Uncle Bob stormed out of the planning meeting.
They will remember if Mom and Aunt Sue stopped talking for 6 months because of it.
And the kids are watching. That's a really chilling thought from the source.
It is, but it's so true. The audience isn't just the attendees at the service, it's the next generation. Your children and your nieces and nephews are watching how the adults handle this crisis. Are you modeling resilience and collaboration? Or are you modeling bitterness and pettiness? You are actively teaching them how to grieve. You are teaching them how to handle family conflict.
That puts a lot of responsibility on us, but I have to ask, what if the family is just toxic? What if collaboration just isn't possible because the other person is truly impossible to work with?
That is a reality for many, many people. And in those specific cases, the source says we have to redefine success.
So success isn't always harmony.
In complex or toxic family systems, success is restraint. Success is biting your tongue when you want to stream. Success is choosing not to escalate, choosing not to retaliate, choosing not to take the bait when it's dangled in front of you.
So just staying calm while someone else is spiraling, that becomes the victory.
It is an act of love, both for the deceased and for yourself. It is an act of self-care. You are protecting your own peace and the dignity of the event. You can walk away from it saying, I behaved with dignity no matter what they did. And that is a win.
And finally, there's the post-service shift.
The realization that comes after, a week later, a month later. When the adrenaline finally fades, families look back. And usually they realize that the small things they fought so fiercely over, the font, the flowers, that one song, they just didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. The source encourages us to accept imperfection. The service was an act of love, not a performance review.
An act of love, not a performance review. I love that. It takes so much pressure off.
It allows you to finally breathe.
So let's wrap this up with our outro and summarize some of the key takeaways. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. If I had to boil it all down to a cheat sheet, I'd say this. First, just recognize the pressure cooker. Conflict is normal. Don't be ashamed of it. You aren't a bad family because you're fighting. You're a grieving family.
Second, make that critical mindset shift. Stop asking, what do I want? And start asking what best represents them. Use that shared remembrance of them as your neutral anchor.
Third, use your tools. Schedule the talks. Don't fight at midnight when you're exhausted. Use the validation technique. I understand why that matters to you. And please hit the pause button when the cortisol spikes. Remember the biology of it all.
And finally, pick your battles. Prioritize what really truly matters to you and be willing to let the rest go. Embrace the good enough goodbye.
Exactly.
Before we sign off for the Funeral Channel Network podcast, here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. We spend so much time and energy trying to avoid conflict. We think a good funeral is a quiet, peaceful one.
Right. We conflate silence with peace, and they're not the same thing.
Not at all. But the source asks us to consider this. What if the conflict is actually a compliment?
That's a really powerful reframe.
Think about it. Indifference doesn't scream. Indifference doesn't fight over song choices. Only people who desperately, deeply care about the person who died and about their own place in the family story, only they fight this hard.
It's a chaotic, messy, painful proof of love.
So the next time your brother is yelling about the catering or your aunt is crying about the font on the program, try, just for a second, to see it not as a disaster but as energy. It's misplaced energy, it's loud, and it's definitely annoying. But it is not apathy. And as long as it's not apathy, there's something there you can work with.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
A proactive step for the future. Maybe talk about some of this stuff now before you're in the crisis. But for today, thank you all for listening to this deep dive. Navigating grief is never, ever easy, but hopefully this roadmap helps you find just a little more harmony in the process.
Take care of yourselves out there.
See you next time.